Hello, hello. It has been another 2 weeks, believe it or not, which means it is time for Articast, and that is what you are listening to. Alright, so for you guys today, we have some brand new news, a new segment we will be calling the Artifact News Network. A little bit of a joke, but we do have some serious stuff to cover, of course. And then we are going to be covering the title of this podcast, a little bit from Horsecow Sean, on why this game will not be a Hearthstone clone, like a lot of games are on the market. But without further ado, let's just jump right into the news. How are you guys doing today? Doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
Ready to
Not
talk
bad,
about ready to talk about some great artifact news?
Artifact News Network.
Yeah, this is our new segment. I'm gonna call it Artifact News Network. I'm gonna put on a little voice too, be a little nasally. Just kidding, that's a little shade, but there's no shade. None at all. No shade at Valve News Network. Love him. He's a great guy. Anyways, jumping into our first topic here. So the game now has its own Steam page, which is pretty big because it didn't. Kind of awkward because it's made by Valve, right? And by finally having its own Steam page, they had to put like some information out there, and the most important thing is like the technical behind the scenes type of things, like who's playing the game and like when it gets updated. But like I said, this is kind of a big deal because it lets us know that there are some people who are playing it right now and who they are. People like Admiral Bulldog, former professional player for Dota,
Yikes.
former TI winner. I'm just kidding. Once you're a TI winner, that's a lifetime thing. Great guy, really great guy. I heard that Life Coach is playing it. Fantastic at all card games. Really good player. Odie Pixel is playing it from what I've heard. He is a Dota personality, does like casting, all that type of stuff. So he's pretty well known with Valve. And there's a few other people, there's rumors about who has it and who doesn't. But I don't know, what do you guys think about like us finally having a page and like we know that there's people playing it right now?
I like that with the images they've brought us a lot of the heroes that are going to be in the game, and like strictly saying who is. We can't necessarily say who isn't, but like we have what appears to be, we've got Luna, we've got Zeus, Lycan. Some of these were seen from the leaked videos, but this is just like official canon stuff, nothing like shady at all. I think we can see something along the lines of like Sorla Khan in the last images, which is really cool because that's new. And then we also get to see some of the card names with the photos on it. Like there's one here, it's called like Divine Purpose, has a picture of Omni Knight, which means that a lot of these cards are going to be things that are associated with a hero that have nothing to do with their, or at least aren't their four abilities from Dota. So it's not just like ability names being ported over, even if they did different things. Like they're not just going to be the four abilities of a hero skinned over into a card, right? There's going to be different things going on.
It's always good to see more official stuff from Artifact because as of right now, we've had very minor actual contact from Valve about the game. Most of the stuff we've had is an iPhone video of a screen, so it's good to see more screenshots and stuff released.
Yeah, that's really nice. But also, like, I think, at least looking at the subreddit, this has been a really big, or two really big things that people have been talking about. The first one, not so controversial. It's just we can see the game being updated, and this gets some people really hyped, right? Because they see like an update get dispatched, and even though that has absolutely zero correlation with like anything happening, people get really excited, which I mean it's kind of fun, but it really doesn't have a huge purpose. But the big thing that I actually see a lot of people talking about that is a little controversial is, so we know now that people who are outside of Valve are playing, right? So these are people who have a chance to compete on a competitive level or a former competitive level. Another shade at Bulldog there, but that the problem with this, if you really think about it, is a lot of people are worried that these people are getting like a head start to being really good at the game. And this will be a problem not only for like, just ranked ladder standings, kind of like not so big deal things like that, but also it becomes a big deal when people are worried about $1 million tournament happening next year and you have some people who might have like a couple months advantage. Is that something that you guys have a problem with?
I think from who we know is playing it, right? So we have Bulldog, we have a card game player. What'd you say his name was?
Life coach?
Life Coach, and then we have OD Pixel. Well, a couple of these guys are going to be primarily popularizers, right? Bulldog's going to be streaming, showing the game, getting everybody introduced to it once he's allowed to, that is. And he's been a popularizer for Dota for a long time. Like, again, he's no longer playing at the professional level, so he spends his time Twitch streaming and showing people that these games are more than just esports, they're also games, right? They're fun. So I don't think, for example, him or maybe OD Pixel are going to be like issues, but like Life Coach and other like professional card game players that are allowed to play this right now, that could be a problem. But at the same time, as soon as this game is opened up to the grand public, I think the ladder is going to adjust itself, so to speak, where the best players are going to rise very quickly. There might be an initial advantage to people who have a couple months, and if some of these best players, right, that are going to rise up on the ladder are already in the beta.
I feel like it's a bit of a yes and no. Like it's a problem and also not. Because as of right now, there's maybe 50 people in the beta. I don't know. The peak on the Steam app was like 26 or something at a time. So that's not very many. And if those like 50 or even 100 people have a month or so advantage, like even like 6 months advantage on us, that won't be much of a problem, I don't think. Especially because I agree that most people are just going to be people to popularize the game and get it known. The card game pros that are playing it right now are already going to have an advantage on the vast majority of people playing anyway, so I don't think that's much of a problem.
You don't think that kind of stacks up? Like a player who's already going to be slightly better at a card game than you is also getting a time-based advantage?
Yes, I guess, but I feel like the fact that they are already well versed in card games is more advantageous.
Well, and I think a good angle to look at this too from is that like, okay, you have to look at it from Valve's perspective. So they're sitting here, they've been working on this game for a really long time, and as far as they know, they have it well balanced for their staff that's been playing it. But there's only so much a group of people can really figure out about a game's meta and like how to balance it and bug test, right? So they're like, well, we need to get new people in. And yeah, they could grab like nobody's off of the street, but it makes a lot more sense to just get people who know card games in and out and will think of ways to break it and ways to develop metas very, very quickly. And they get this really good bonus that a lot of them happen to be popular, right? Valve is not a company that markets like aggressively at all. They don't really take out ad space. They don't, do that type of thing. The way they market is they just make games and hope that people play them. And that's literally what they're doing here is they've made this game and they want some people to play it. And it would be great if they're really popular people because it helps them get the game out, quicker to people and get more people playing it. So from like Valve's perspective, this is like kind of almost impossible to avoid. I'm sure like there's some people at Valve that do agree it's unfortunate that there's $1 million tournament so close to these people having a quote advantage, but really how can they avoid it? Like what can you expect from Valve to really like change the situation? This is what they have to do being somebody making a game, right?
Yeah, I think you have to have people who are extremely good at card games be playing in your beta. It may cause the issues that we've spoken of, but at the same time, if you don't have people that are going to be able to look at every single card in the game and figure out the exact like best combo, you don't want your game to be you think it's like super complicated. Like we've talked about how they want the game to be extremely complicated and take thousands of hours to even be decent at, right? You can't have like that thought process and say, I think this is what this game is going to be, and then it's released to the public, and somebody busts the ladder in the first 3 months, like what happened with that one season of Overwatch, where somebody got like the top rank in the system in like 2 weeks in like what a 6 month season, and then just sat there at 5,000 for the entire time. Like that is a major issue that has happened in a lot of different games. And we don't want that type of thing to happen here where something just gets completely figured out very quickly and your game ends up a little more one-dimensional than you think it's going to be.
you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because you guys know more about Dota than I do. Wasn't the first international of Dota mostly just teams who were playing the game Dota 1, and also it was mostly just publicity? Because I feel like that's how Artifact will be. It's just the first tournament is just gonna be publicity because the game comes out end of 2018 and the tournament is beginning of 2019. So I don't think Valve could even expect people to get good enough to play on a pro level, even if we had access to the game right away at the same time, because like maybe it's 4 months, maybe it's 6 months between the tournament. $1 million tournament only on 6 months of experience is not much time at all. So I feel like it's just gonna be publicity and all invites anyway.
But yeah, I don't know. They're different, but they do share the publicity similarity.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I think it's mostly just publicity, right? Like, I think when the second one comes around, I think then it'll be a lot better because, like, I mean, it's the same thing with Dota. Like, if you just look at the way they played in the first one, they weren't very good. And I know it's a big meme that, hey, Navi just won the first international because they were allowed to go, right? Not necessarily that they were a fantastic team or anything. It was just more that they were able to go. And a lot of people say that. And I think to some extent that'll be kind of true here, where maybe our first champion won't be somebody. I'm sure they'll be good, right? They'll be a really good player, but they probably won't be the best in the world. Definitely not the best the game will ever see. Not by a long shot. The game will evolve and we'll actually be able to figure out who's the best player later on. But actually, I want to move on to our second topic and away from the salt mine that is getting into the closed beta. Like that makes people so salty. But a little bit lighter, something that everybody's really happy about is we actually got a little more info about a new hero card. So we saw this like raven looking hero. He looks like a crow. He's got like a pirate hook on his hand earlier, but we had no idea who he was. We were just like, he's a new hero. Maybe he's a creep. Hard to say. Probably a hero though. But we actually learned what he does. And I think it's pretty interesting. So what he does, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when he trades hits during the attacking phase, he actually sells the opponent's items that they have equipped, and you gain their gold. So this is like really interesting. Like off the top of my head, I would just say that's really overpowered, but maybe that's kind of the way this game is going, is that every hero is just gonna have like some ridiculous stuff. I don't know. What did you guys think when you saw this?
A hero that is able to sell the enemy's items when it attacks them, you said?
Yeah, I believe
Should I
that's his
get this 100%
concept.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe the
this
word was condemn, but I don't know exactly what condemn did.
And
well,
actually, I have a quick clarification on the subreddit Sir Belvedere, the update boy. He does say that Ravenhook is actually not a
oh,
hero.
interesting.
He's a creep.
Great.
Yeah, he's just a creep. But you do get gold equal to the base cost of an item when he attacks a hero with an item. So that's kind of actually that asks another question. So
Condemn a
creeps.
random item.
Yeah, so like if they have multiple equipped, I assume it's just gonna be a random one. So it won't be like BS where it just destroys your entire inventory.
Tidbit in this. You said a random item. I noticed from the Steam page that every hero effectively has 3 item slots. One that appears to be damage based, one that appears to be I think armor or health based, and then one that could either be if the second one's armor, the third one's health, or like cast based, basically like ability based. Because you have 3 different icons. One's cross swords, we can presume that's damage, and then one is a sort of a shield shape is why I think this, and the third one being more shaped. I believe that's a heart. Yeah, it looks like it's a heart. So we're looking at probably damage and armor and health items. The card, the last screenshot on there shows what appears to be a ring of health and a claymore, which could be examples of our items here. Most likely are. So when you condemn a random item, you could make a hero less defensive or less aggressive, but that's going to be an RNG thing. So that probably pushes him from being overpowered to being just quite good.
Well, and it shows an interesting concept in the game too, that creeps are going to have like really powerful abilities as well, right? It's not going to be just heroes because like this could be like from what we understand of card games right now, like this is a pretty good ability. This is something that you would expect on, a card that costs like a lot of mana in Hearthstone or something of that equivalent. So creeps are also going to be quite powerful, is kind of what this tells me, right?
Yeah, it's also pretty cool. Like, we haven't heard much about summoning minions or creeps in general. Like, we've heard that it's confirmed, but we don't know much about them other than that. I don't know if we've seen haven't seen them used in gameplay.
A further thing is just to talk one more second about the items. I noticed that the axe card, which is the 5th screenshot, which just seems very important here, is he has 2 items on him, and you can see a green. His attack is green, and so is his HP, which means that these are directly affecting the stats of the cards. So, Ravenhook's abilities, even if he is just a creep, that maybe only gets to do it on one hero before he falls prey to some sort of CC abilities, is he just feels like a stat reduction, which seems very common in Hearthstone, for example. Seems like a type of card that would either lower your. It's like he has a 1 in 3 chance to lower your armor, your health, or your HP in a general sense. That doesn't seem that broken when you phrase it that way. Muting someone's items in a Dota sense sounds really bad, but in like a card game sense, stat reduction seems pretty normal. As well as it's RNG based, which could put the hero down. But something else that was said in the interview that released his stats, right? This is just pushing us to our next thing, is that he allows you to play black cards. He is a creep that allows you to play black cards. So I feel like there is this large chance, this is some speculation, but that he could be the product of something other than black cards. It seems notable that they would say for a creep that he lets you play black class cards, right? If he is not already the product of black class cards. So this could be the type of thing where we know so far that green heroes are most likely the ones that are going to spend a lot of their time spawning other units, right? So potentially you could have a green card that can spawn, like a green hero maybe, that can spawn Ravenhook, and Ravenhook allows you to play black cards, creating some synergy between green and black decks.
I think that's like definitely like something that actually could be happening. Like so like they don't like introduce hero ability cards to the deck, right? But they can actually allow you to play a type of card. Like you said, like and they also don't have the ability of heroes to just keep on respawning over and over. So it's just like a temporary way to be able to use certain cards because like yeah, when you think about like deck building, right? Even though we know that the amount of cards that you can have in your deck is unlimited for this game, heroes are finite. And that makes a very big issue of like so a whole entire swath of ability cards in the game, let's say black cards, are just unusable if a black hero doesn't fit into your deck in any way. And that could be like really tough for balance, right? So I'm sure like the way Valve and Garfield look at this is, hey, we add a way for people to play black cards, even though they don't have a black hero. This can actually mean that certain black spells that are needed to counter other stuff can still be part of your deck and they're still usable. You're not like literally just out of the game because you don't have black heroes. I feel like maybe that's like their way of patching up this a really big problem that could happen by not having a certain color of hero. I think that's maybe what they're going for.
Not only not having that certain color of hero in your deck, but just not on the board at the current time, right? He's an unreusable card, so if you're in a situation where maybe your black hero in your black green deck hasn't come back up yet, you can play this, and it would allow you to use your black cards before he like it just gives more options. Basically, you're right. It basically stops any sort of like you have to have XYZ to play an entire class set of cards. It opens up more options with that.
Yeah. All right, and then I'm gonna like move on to our last news subject here, if that's all right.
Yep.
All right. So our next big thing is GameSpot. It was a little late. At first, we assumed this was a whole entire like, hey, GameSpot went to Valve and they got more footage. This is new. It's actually not. It's just from the whole entire press event that they held about 2 weeks ago. But GameSpot finally released their footage from it, and they didn't just film about 2 minutes with their iPhone. They actually filmed the gameplay, and there's no background noise, and there's actual Valve employees talking too. It looked like Valve employees or sounded like Valve employees explaining the game. And it was actually really, really good because you get to see like the visual stuff, which is important for a game. Visual style is always really important, like animations and art style, but also just kind of like how the turns play out, and we already get to see like a little bit of the strategies of the game coming around. So like you saw like Bristleback, and he's like just mowing down a lane. He's like really powerful, and you're like, well, oh, so this is a thing you can do, is just like leave a hero in a lane to go crazy on the tower. And then like we also saw a really interesting strat. This is a joke, by the way, but playing a card that would debuff your own hero by 2 damage or do 2 damage to them. Sorry, the like reporter just had like a brain fart moment where the Valve employee tells them that, hey, look, this card does like 2 damage or something to a unit, and he's like, so I should play this on my own unit. But
I mean, if Bristle's that strong, the
right,
screenshots I have him sitting
Might
at
as well
like
just end the game faster.
yeah, it's like it's
15
over, I'm
HP or
done.
something with no items. 15 HP with no items, like seems pretty high comparably to like the, for example, what looks to be like 8 on a base Luna, 10 on a base Lycan. Yeah, the actual health stats are really hard to see directly, but some of them like look like their base stats are like, I think Luna's is base 8. It looks to be, and her damage
Yeah.
is actually quite low. She's actually a blue card. That's something interesting, right? So Luna actually ends up a blue card.
So the way that Luna's card works, from what I've heard, is her whole entire synergy is she casts like Moonbeam on somebody, Lunar Beam, whatever it's
Lucid
called in
Beam, yeah.
Lucent Beam, right? Don't use Warcraft names, but she casts it on somebody every turn, I think, and then she can play Eclipse, and basically every single time you use it in lane, normally it adds a charge, and then when you play the actual Eclipse card, for each charge you've used, it like unleashes them. So she fits in less with like, you would think, oh, she's an edgy hero, so green. But no, she fits in more with the idea of like late game spell casting, which is what we've been told Blue's kind of overall theme is, right?
Interesting that they aren't just their stat in Dota copied over to the color in the game.
Yeah, I think it like I think it kind of has to be though. You know, like I mean, some of them are the same. Like Bristleback and Axe are both red heroes, but you do have weird ones where like Luna is different, and I think there was one other like pretty notable one. I mean, like I think PA is a black hero, which makes sense since
Yep.
they're supposed to be a little more assassin based, but she's not a green. And I mean, Lycan is a strength hero in Dota. You would think red, but he summons units, so that is a green concept in this game. So it's a little bit different.
It'll
But
be interesting for primarily Dota players to stop associating a hero with a color based on their primary attribute in Dota, just because this game does actually introduce a lot more concepts.
well, something I want to touch on too is you're like, man, Bristleback looks like he has like a lot of stats going on, and my theory on why this is that in general, red cards are going to be like super stat based, right, and like super tanky, but they're going to be like really really crappy at spells. So I've heard some people say like Axe has no innate ability, Bristleback's innate ability isn't super strong, and the hero cards he gives your deck are pretty weak. So I think those heroes are just gonna be like your ones that you send to a lane to just like knock down a tower in the early game, and your enemies just kind of have to ignore. Like that's the strat we see is like he gets his Zeus in the lane against this Bristleback just gets knocked out like right away, just like slapped, and he's done. And you know he's talking to the Valve employee, and he's like, "Hey, should I just play the Zeus back into that lane to stop this Bristleback from just continually hitting my tower?" And the Valve employee is like, "You're just gonna feed the Zeus, you know, because every single time one of your hero cards dies, the enemy gets gold." So I think this is this really interesting concept where like heroes like Zeus, who are late game spellcasters, seem incredibly weak as we understand it against red heroes, but this game is probably not. It is going to be like the pacing matters a lot, is what I'm trying to say. Where like eventually, I think in the late game, Zeus is going to just destroy Bristleback. And I really like this concept and the way it plays around with lanes. Like you have to just dodge some heroes and you know spend your time waiting for the late game. I just think in general, like this footage showed us like a lot of like it didn't really show us like anything like incredibly new. Like there wasn't any new cards or anything, but it was just kind of like a really interesting way to see like the game actually being played by somebody, you know? And it's not like very tactical, but at the same time, or you know, like doesn't make a huge difference, but to the gameplay of it. But just watching it made me like a lot more confident that this game's gonna be really good, you know? Because it was like, man, this game looks like really fun to play.
I think something notable is that you can't initially say how the game is played from what we've seen. Like you can't say, "Oh, I figured this game out," or "Oh, it's exactly like blank, exactly like Gwent, exactly like Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, chaotic." But like you can't
Chaotic.
initially go, "Yeah, this game is just blank game but with blank." Like it definitely looks extremely unique.
All right. Well, is there anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the news goes?
I like that you can already see that they just ported over the hero icons from Dota into Artifact in the left corner. Like they're not changed at all. They are exactly what you put on the map in Dota in the beginning of the laning stage and during the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, you're just a software developer. You've been working on this game all day, and you're like, yeah, we probably need a little bit of UI here. And you're like, dude, I don't want to wait for the art team to make anything here. We already have a picture of Axe. Let's just put his face here. It's fine. It's fine.
Most likely, actually.
But yeah, with that, let's just wrap up the good old Artifact News Network and head into our next thing. All right, so now we're on to our second topic. This one is a little bit less about news and it's just more kind of talking about our feelings of the game. So the idea that we're going to be talking about, and of course what this podcast is going to be named after, or is named about, is that this game is not going to be a Hearthstone clone, and why we think it isn't a Hearthstone clone. I'm actually going to hand this one off to my buddy here.
So when Hearthstone's come out, it's basically created a monopoly in the market for a very long time. There are some slight competitors that have come up recently, Gwent being the most notable. But in general, when people see a digital card game these days, they go, "Oh, like Hearthstone," and we kind of have the initial stigma that things are going to be extremely related to, if not direct copies of Hearthstone. There's already like things across the different like game forums that are like, this spell looks like X, this spell looks like Y, and yes, of course, there's going to be a lot of similarities because in a card game you have to have certain types of things. You have to have like AOE clear versus single target clear. You have to have stat reduction. You've got to have things that summon other things. These are just like general trading card like competitive card game concepts. But the game is not going to be that verbatim. This exists and it's exactly like something else, right? There's a few like primary things that we can see from everything we know already. We're going to try to stick to less speculation, more what we know, but that's kind of going to be limited because we're looking at short videos as well as screenshots. The first thing that I'd like to know is something we touched on in our last episode, which is the deck size. All right, in Hearthstone, a lot of the times you're sitting there going, I could run out of cards. Not in the current meta because it's a bunch of aggro mostly, but like in a lot of the times, or in a lot of the different patches and seasons for this game, you have like tempo decks and decks that are based or in control decks, which take a while to come online, and you have some cards that are going to worry about immediately running you out. Now we initially heard that it was 40 cards as a minimum, and you can go above that. Now this at first is going to say, okay, that's already 10 more than Hearthstone, right? So this game's going to be a little bit longer paced, and we're not limited on an upper bound, we're limited on a lower rather than the reverse. But that is going to be card split across 3 lanes and 3 games at once. What do you guys think this is going to do for basically the diversity of the game compared to Hearthstone's exactly 30 and no more, no less?
Personally, I think it's going to make the game's like pacing a lot more long form. but also a lot more dynamic, right? I mean, we've already heard that this game is longer than a Hearthstone game. Like, we've heard the estimates of like 15 minutes maybe. And I think this is actually quite a bit different from Hearthstone because everyone who plays Hearthstone knows that the games go by like really, really quickly. They're meant to be played really quickly. They're meant to be played like while you're on the toilet. You know, that's like why it works really well on the phone. And I think that's like the first really big notable difference we have. And something really big about games is how long they take to play and how dedicated they have to be to play. Undoubtedly, when they were developing Hearthstone, they wanted to hit that like average match time that they currently have in the game, where it's like very, very quick. Most games in the current meta are decided or won before like turn 8, right? And that's how they wanted it. Just like really quick games. If you lose one, you're on to the next. But that doesn't seem to be the focus for Artifact. It doesn't seem to be the focus of just like continually just grinding out a bunch of short games or playing them whenever you can catch a game. It seems to be more like a long form chess match where they want you to be like thinking a couple turns ahead and they want you really into the current match you're playing. And I think that reflects just more on like the goals of the design in this game, where I think it's more like long form, if that makes sense. Do you guys kind of think that's like the idea behind it is like this was designed for like long form play, long form strategic play, whereas Hearthstone was kind of built for more like fun and light play.
I definitely would agree. The fact that there's 3 lanes and that you could all the strategy that comes with even having just even if you played Hearthstone on 3 boards, there'd be so much more strategy into it. It adds a whole nother layer of things. Something else with the deck size is in Magic the Gathering, there's also a similar rule. The minimum is 60 and there's no max, I believe, in standard. But I could be corrected. I could be wrong about that. But most of the time in Magic, the consensus right thing to do is to have 60 cards, the minimum amount, so that you're more likely to draw the cards that you want. I do wonder if it'll be similar in Artifact, or that you will need more cards because the games are so much longer.
Now, something you mentioned there is going to be the brute part of this section, which is 3 boards. Okay, so sometimes you're like, or if you take a nice look at this and you're like, okay, there's 3 boards. Maybe it's 3 separate card games going on, Hearthstone games going on, Artifact games going on, whatever. But like, it's 3 separate ones that have maybe some interaction, but not an immense amount. But I don't think that is what that is going to be. Somewhat due to uh plain old optimism and hopefulness that this is going to be not like that, but also you can see from some of the things we've been released so far, the screenshots, for example, off the Steam page. We're going to reference those again. There's a new information, and what we have is, in the very first screenshot, you have a lane with a lot of stuff going on. There's like 3 creeps on one side, a Zeus, a Lycan, and a wolf spawn from Lycan, a creep on the other side with another copy of Lycan, Zeus, Luna, and an unnamed hero who is some sort of Jaguar man. Looks like a green hero here with some sort of ability. And then you have a hand that's filled with what looks to be like 9 plus cards that are just usable in that lane. And it looks like there's a couple more behind it. And so this lane is already as complex as a Hearthstone game at its max, right? Not necessarily its max, but like the board is damn near full here. And you have space between cards, for example, where in Hearthstone, when you place things, it would place it always adjacent. But the primary thing here is if you look in the top corner and you see there's 3 lanes, right? We're in this lane, there's a lot happening here. But in the other 2 lanes, the only thing you see is the middle lane has 2 heroes on one side and nothing for the enemy, and has just a Crystal Maiden and nothing for the opponent. Now, what I'm thinking from this is the fact that you have 3 boards interacting each other, and reminder, your win condition in this game is to kill 2 towers or 1 tower in the Ancient. Towers have 40 HP, which is already slightly higher than the Hearthstone's traditional hero HP of 30, and the Ancient itself has 80. And I think 3 boards that can interact and win conditions that come from either taking 2 towers or the Ancient and 1 tower is going to be, you're going to have things like sack lanes, or lanes you just don't want to interact with. Like, we mentioned earlier how a Bristleback going into a lane will just feed a Zeus. So maybe Zeus doesn't do that great tower damage, but you don't want to put anything against that unless you have some big play to go with, because you're just going to lose to an immediate hero that just bursts you down, right? Or immediate set of creeps that are just able to do a certain thing, but can't necessarily take tower. So one of your priorities in this game is going to be how much damage is happening to you, which is of course a priority in all trading card games, but it's going to be like resource allocation between different places. You could have a lane that you absolutely do nothing in. Neither player does anything because they're like, someone's focused over here, and you're like, I have to respond to this, and then I have to respond to this, that kind of thing. So 3 boards with interactions gives us a whole set of dichotomies and trichotomies, even with 3 lanes here, that are gonna appear just out of like the fact that you don't have the not necessarily the attention span, but the resources within your deck. Say you're sitting at the minimum of 40 to handle all 3 lanes. It's going to create like larger decks maybe can handle more lanes. That's speculation, but like that type of idea. Do you guys think the 3 board thing is going to what kind of uniqueness do you think is going to appear out of the 3 board setup?
The biggest thing that will probably come out of it is like what you were saying, where you put your priorities and where you put the resources. I completely agree with that kind of idea, because it creates like this really interesting thing of where you put stuff, which I don't think Hearthstone really has. It has on some level, like we know, like when you play this card, like a spell card, the minions that it summons play to the right of the board, and there's like that element to it, and there's
And
like
a lot of adjacency.
yeah, there's like a lot of adjacency stuff, but that's like the extent of it. That's where it ends. Where this game is like going to be that, but like a whole entire different direction going on, right? Where you need to like dodge enemies, and you know, you were talking about like feeding the Zeus card. It adds this whole entire another thing too, where it's like, I mean, once in a while you could give your enemy like a little bit of a like advantage resource wise, maybe like a little bit. Like there's a few cards in Hearthstone I think that did stuff like gave your enemy cards and mana and all that type of stuff. But that wasn't just like a base part of the game. This game is like following, for lack of a better comparison, kind of Dota's design philosophy behind like your bad play will literally give your enemy more resources, right? So like if you're doing really dumb stuff, like being like, hey, we're gonna just throw Zeus at this hero that he cannot trade with, then he's gone. Not only do you not have the option to use Zeus for a turn or two, but your enemy now has more resources to play with. They just have more gold now. They can throw more items onto the bristleback, or they can throw more items into a completely different lane. And I think this is like a really big part of the game too. I know I'm kind of transitioning away from the idea of like 3 lanes, but I think this is a really good thing to bring up too, is that Artifact's design is not only about like rewarding players for playing good, but also it punishes players for being bad by rewarding the enemies. You know, like that's something very interesting that I just don't feel like we see in Hearthstone.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with what you said there. As you guys were talking there, I just had a bit of a mind uh, daydream thing. I was thinking about this game. The more I think about it, the more I realize this game is similar to Clash Royale. Like, just 2 lanes thing. I'm like, yeah, this is just Clash Royale. All jokes aside though, but I definitely think the lane thing isn't necessarily 100% unique to Artifact, obviously, but it's the first time this has been implemented into a card game, and a card game by a AAA company. So it'll bring that into the spotlight for most players. Um, there's so many, like, I don't even know if it's worth talking about all the layers of strategy it'll give to the game. Because imagine just trying to play 3 Hearthstone games at once, and it's just weird. It's weird and cool how much more it opens up the game.
Playing 3 Hearthstone games at once, right? Yeah, we're trying to show the dichotomy through comparison here. That alone is complicated enough, and if you were playing those 3 games, they wouldn't have any interaction with each other. You already have a layer of complexity that appears out of the game's like fundamentals, not even the fact that, okay, maybe this game is like other card games on its surface level. When you're good at it, maybe it's different. We don't want that kind of thing. That doesn't even appear to be a thing here, just because like you have one hand for all 3 of these games. for all three of these boards. At least that's I believe so. I'd say with how many cards I'm seeing in everyone's hand when they're playing. Yeah, it looks like when you see a shot of all three lanes at once, you have a single hand for that, and you just have 3 different sets of mana to allocate. But back to resources, this is something that other card games, as far as I know, don't do. That is directly uh, comparable to a game of Dota or a game of League, Heroes of the Storm, Smite, whatever. But it's larger in Dota because you lose gold when you die and you gain gold when you get kills. So there's a lot more fluidity in the momentum of the game. If you feed a death, you're not only losing your hero, you're losing some of your resources, you're losing time. Your choices mean a lot more. And in games like Hearthstone, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not exactly sure on Gwent, but there's only the resource of mana. There isn't the resource of gold in this entire second phase based on a concept other than what I have on the board and what I have in my hand. The shopping phase randomizes item cards that I believe you have in your deck.
Actually, that's a good thing to point out too. Is I think how it works is that there's 2 cards that are from your deck, and I think there's one that's like Secret Shop, which is just a random item, right? So like this is like another thing that sets it apart. Although Hearthstone has a little bit of it, of like cards coming from beyond your deck. So like Hearthstone does this with things like, you'll play a card and you get an option of like 3 random cards, or like just pull a random card out of the air from this set that's in the game right now. But this is just going to be like every turn in this game is going to have that there are cards that are in nobody's deck that are entering the gameplay. That's like a whole thing. So sorry, that was just another really interesting thing that this game is doing very differently.
There's a thing there too with that. Cards that are appearing out of no one's deck in games like Hearthstone, if you want things that give you a random option between the 3, say like Adapt in the Beast set and stuff like that, you have to put those cards in your deck already in place of other things that may do something different, right? Things that may be more worth stat wise but don't give you that added RNG. This is going to be you're choosing your cards based on other factors and still have this option for a random rapier to appear in my game, for example.
Something else to say about that is we already so far in this podcast we've talked about a lot of opportunities that Artifact has RNG in it, and I right off the bat I hope that Artifact doesn't become too RNG based. Just the fact that items in the shop can be randomized. Like if you did get a rapier on turn 3, what would happen? Would you just win the game right out straight up? I hope that Artifact and Garfield, I hope Garfield knows how to limit RNG to where you don't just win because you got a random card out of the shop or something to that extent.
The chances of you pulling a rapier at turn 3, I'm gonna guess even if that is a thing, you won't have the gold for it anyway.
That is true.
It could be also that type of thing. Like they could not limit the way the secret shop random item works. For example, something very powerful could come out on turn 1. You're like, damn, if only it was like turn 6 and I had enough like gold to purchase in this. Because another set of resource allocation here, to spin off both of these, is say you have gold from kills, you have gold from creep kills, and there's some items in the shop. You have a choice between probably buying large items that do really great things for singular heroes or singular creeps, or buying some mid-range things for multiple things at a time. And this harkens back into AoE control versus single target control. You pile all your stuff into a single character, and then you get whatever the equivalent of Reaper Scythe, for example, just pulling a Dota ability out, and that just completely mutes it. That hero dies, you lose those items or whatever. That's a really big risk reward situation that you're gonna have to spend your time analyzing. While if you put some mid range items, because you're also getting gold from the interactions of 3 lanes, right? You get the gold from interactions of 3 lanes. Say you put a bunch of mid range items into a single lane. It may be a lot of characters, but it's a single lane, and then you get eclipsed, and you just lose all of these items on all these different characters, all these buff ups that eclipse. It almost doesn't even matter after that, right? So you're suddenly trying to allocate the gold gain and the gold loss from 3 different boards onto either singular characters or multiple sets, while trying to keep pressure up on all the boards, unless you're running a sack lane type of situation, where in that case it gets easier to focus on what you're doing, but it also gets easier for the opponent to clear it because they can clear it on this board, right? If you're placing items in a board where someone doesn't have a response, that's going to be a large decision that is going to be high risk, high reward. Can they suddenly respond to it, or did you just get yourself a free, like, ridiculous amount of tower damage or something?
Something I never thought of was that in Dota and MOBAs in general, you start out with your early game items, you go to mid game, go to late game, and you're 6 slotted by the end of the game most of the time, or in the late games. In Artifact, you're going to have opportunity for that same thing to happen, and I never had that hadn't occurred to me till right now. So the game, you start out with a branch or a ring of health, and you can end 3 slotted. That's so much more complexity that the game has that I had not occurred to me.
Well, isn't it, and this is just me like thinking off of that idea right now, isn't that like almost more fun than what like a lot of card games do right now? Because like okay, so like there's not a real sense of progression in a let's say a Hearthstone match. Like eventually, yeah, it's kind of cool that you get your whole board filled, but I think it's something a little bit different to like build up a hero and have them become like really big and feel like accomplished that you got this done. And you can see it sometimes in Hearthstone when you do something like really cool, like like do the good old priest play where you like double a minion's health and then set its attack equal to its health or whatever. I think yeah, right. those those things happen, but you feel so like awesome when it happens, right? That's like a really good moment in Hearthstone where you're just like, dude, I just created like the beefiest minion and it just like mows things down. That's awesome. And I think that like the whole entire item system in Artifact kind of is chasing that feeling, but it's different from Hearthstone in that it's making it every game, right? So like every game you have the potential or almost the guarantee to just have some really really cool hero that's doing a lot, and you just feel like really good that you were able to make that happen. I feel like that's a lot more rewarding than a Hearthstone game where like right now you play Hearthstone, like I swear that like 50% of your matches it's just a board spammed with like little stuff, and then as soon as the enemy doesn't have any way to clear it and they recognize that, they just concede. This game is going to be a little bit different in that like each player is just going to have like a real hope to win and a really cool hero that's like built up or has the potential to be built up. I think that's a lot more fun and will be a lot more like entertaining to play for people.
I'm getting a nice idea of why they let Admiral Bulldog into the beta. Okay. So you win either from 2 towers, which is a total of 80 HP, and a tower and an ancient, which is 40 and 80 HP, so 120 there. You open up situations where, say I have a sack lane and the enemy got the tower there. Well, that's kind of bad, but I'm focused on the other 2 lanes and I'm getting towers there. So you could just literally have the enemy placing some of their resources into trying to beat down an 80 HP ancient while you're playing 2 lanes towards killing 2 40 HP towers and resource splitting there. So you're going to have this idea of like base racing and ratting, basically, in a card game, which is remarkable because usually you're focused on everything in front of you, and it's very hard for like something to get by you. While if you're playing 3 lanes and you're like, okay, there's X hero in this lane and I'm not putting anything to respond to it, there's just a Crystal Maiden sitting there, right? What can she do? And then something ridiculous happens, and suddenly you're staring at no tower in one lane at like a really early turn or something like that. It's just sort of like resource allocation is going to be just, it's almost StarCraft at that point, right? Just like trying to focus on, I have to have X resource, Y resource, Z resource, where X is mana, Y is gold, Z is heroes and creeps. And you have to play location based, you have to play time based, and you have to be thinking about what your enemy can do. And that sort of brings us into the third thing, unless you guys have any thoughts about this part of it again.
Well, one quick thing I would say is all those things kind of add up to make a really good statement that I think encapsulates what people who have played the game say about it. It's the 3D chess of card games right now, right? It's the, hey, we got this cool system like Hearthstone, that's chess. I mean, okay, let's change the analogy. Hearthstone is checkers. Hearthstone is checkers. Let's put Magic at chess, and maybe this is, we haven't played it yet. Maybe it's on the same level as Magic, but maybe it's even, more complex than Magic. Garfield said that his hope is for this game to be the most complex game he's made, or along those lines. So it's like, I think that really encapsulates it, is that this game is the 3D chess of card games. It's taking what we know and it's adding elements from other genres, such as like punishment for playing bad and resource allocation from RTSs, all these like concepts that are in gaming but aren't in card games yet. So that's my serious point. But also a little bit of a joke here. I think it's really exciting for Admiral Bulldog as well, because he can finally play his entire hero pool in one game. So he can play like Nature's Prophet and Lone Druid, and that's about it at the same time. But yeah, those are my kind of closing thoughts on that topic.
Anything for us, Isaac?
I mean, I would totally agree with both the things you guys both have said. It's gonna be so. I just want to get my hands on it, or at least see a full gameplay once. Please, Valve, just a full game. That's all we want. One full game.
One final note on complexity. Not the team, but when you have a bachelor's in mathematics, don't underestimate the amount of complexity you can pull out of this. You said that Garfield does have a bachelor's in mathematics, correct? 4-year degree in.
Yeah, he's a smart boy.
Yeah,
he got a bachelor's.
The types of algorithms he can put into like this game design, if when he's not limited by the fact that you have to use physical cards and have players remembering rules themselves rather than an automated machine doing it. Like, ugh, the limits here are actually astounding, especially for expansions past the base game. Like, this base game looks so complex now, and we have what will eventually be a standard set rotation sort of system. It's just basically this game is built to last, it looks like. Now, this is very presumptuous of us. We're also big Dota fans, big card game fans, big Valve fans, very optimistic, but from the view of people who like what they're seeing, this looks like it's going to last. So the next and probably most likely final part of this is going to be something else about deck building. So you walk into a Hearthstone game and you choose a class. Your class has a specific hero power, which on rare occasions can be changed, but is usually going to be the same thing. That class is known for that hero power, and usually a class is known for a specific style. There's going to be a lot of different variants that play off of this style, but or multiple styles that come out of it, but usually a class is associated with a primary thing, and that's what you're building. Rogues are weapons, druids are big minions with taunts, etc. This game plays off of, instead of a class with hero powers, you have archetypes, which are going to be card colors. Now, so far we know in general what these card colors are going to do. For anyone who is unaware at this point, if you've gotten this far in without that, green is going to be heroes that are based around summoning other heroes. Black cards are going to be assassin based, usually damage, whether it be close up or long range, but it's very glass cannon is a good word for it. Red cards are going to be brute force. They're usually going to have high HP, possibly high health regen, and they're going to sort of punish anything fragile, but not be very good at casting spells. And then blue cards are your classic mage. They're going to use a lot of spells that do a lot of different effects. They're going to be weaker physically, but have a lot in the late game. Now, the reason we talk about classes from Hearthstone is because in this, you're going to have the options of combinations of deck colors. Now, do you guys, I know that the footage I've seen has shown that you could, at that time, play, because it was a demo, play black-green or red-blue, for example. Do you guys know if it is official or not, if there's going to be limitations on how many different card colors you can have in a single deck?
I believe on the IGN stream, like 2 weeks ago at this point, they said that you could have tricolor decks and whatnot.
So like tricolor, but not like all the colors, just because of the limitations, of course, of how many heroes you can have.
I guess theoretically you could, but I don't know. I don't think it would work at all. I guess I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but I believe I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
So the main point with this is it creates interbred classes just straight off the bat, right? If you have an entire green deck, that's going to be very good at one thing, but it's going to be very one-dimensional. In a Hearthstone type game, if you had the equivalent of what we believe to be full green decks, which are going to be like Zoo, effectively, where they spawn lots of minions and play off of multi-target board pressure and sort of waiting for you to not have an answer to clear them to dish out a lot of damage. Or cards that basically continuously spawn things that hit you in the face and then die, that kind of thing. So green off the bat's going to do that. Blue is going to feel a lot like a tempo or a control based, but you initially straight off the bat, because you can do sets of 2, sets of 3, you have these intermixing dichotomies and trichotomies of styles that are going to be almost completely, like some of them might even be completely counterintuitive, right? You have like brute force with spells, brute force with like glass cannon damage, for example, that sort of thing. So my point with all of this is that when you walk into a game and you see the enemy place down their first hero, you don't know what is in the deck. When you walk into a game and you see a warlock, you know it's going to be a number of things. You know it's going to be Q-block, control, Zoolock, Murloc, that type of thing. You know you have like a very limited set of things that you initially are going to presume is going to be in the deck. When you walk into a game and you see someone pull out their first hero and it's a Lycan, you have no idea what the hell is in the rest of the deck, right? Because you can't see. I presume that you can't see what's in the other lanes until like they happen. Like a hero only spawns in that lane once you get to it, but I could be wrong there.
Something I kind of want to point out is I think this is really exciting too, because I hope it kind of like cuts down on the amount of matchup win rates and is more about like the way you play, right? Because like there's definitely this element to Hearthstone where you get into a game and you quickly figure out what type of deck they're running, and you're instantly like, I'm going to win or I'm going to lose just because of how the decks match up, right? So it's like there's no way you can play like, you know, like a zoo deck against a deck that is literally just like control spell after control spell after control spell. There's no way you can do it. Or like something that just relies on super big taunts and you know that you don't have any silences in your deck. Like, you know you're probably not going to win unless like the enemy just has the most rotten luck. I hope that this whole entire system you're kind of talking about, where it's like there's more diversity and the archetypes of decks out there, will avoid these really annoying situations where you just get into the game and you're like, what's the point of me playing this match? I know I'm going to win. I know I'm going to lose. The only thing that would change this is me or my enemy playing really bad or having really bad luck. I hope this is something that like really Artifact is trying to separate itself from Hearthstone in.
So with the fact that you can just have, hold on, let me word this. You walk into a game, you see a Lycan played, you see a green card played, and then you see a blue, and you're like, okay, this is a green-blue deck, and you kind of have somewhat of an idea of what you're playing against, because we talked about you don't want to know exactly what the opponent's going to do or a set of what they're going to do and have exactly planned out, like whether I can win or not. You should have some information on your enemy based on what's happening here. That's going to be pretty inevitable, right? Like you see green cards, you know, okay, there's going to be a decent amount of units, at least on one or two of the boards, that sort of thing. But you could walk into a game and see two colors and play the entire game with it until like some last critical move where suddenly somebody's been holding a single like, or maybe they had RNG. Maybe they have 2 black heroes, 2 green heroes, and 1 blue, and you never see the blue for so long in the game. Or you see all 3 and you're not sure which is like the primary ones that they're focusing on, or if they're splitting them. You have a lot of like ambiguity towards what someone's focused on. And this harkens back also to the fact that we have items, right? You can walk into a game and have certain colors, people could have some presumptions, but all of your item choices could be purely aggressive, or all of your item choices could be purely about buffing cards' HP and regen and stuff like that. And it creates a lot more options here where my deck archetype is created by my choices, the colors placed in the deck, then my item choices, and then my lane presence. And so you've got all these different factors that go just into the creation of the deck and your initial style. Now, obviously, things are going to dominate the meta, but in a game with this many options, it feels like this meta is going to constantly create anti-metas, just like Dota does. Where in most MOBAs, you have exactly what's good, you know what's good, and you try to respond to it. And eventually, someone comes up with exactly what's good at countering the thing that's the best. Then someone's going to counter that, and usually it cycles around, or you get some sort of hybrids to it. And I think this game is going to be the same type of thing, just because you know a lot when you see, like, you have a lot of information when you see the enemy place down heroes or use their opening spells, but it's a sliver compared to what you don't know. It looks like, especially with 40 plus cards in a deck and 3 boards. You don't know what the priorities of your enemy are unless the game's meta gets really one dimensional, which with Alex Garfield in charge probably won't happen.
Right, and I think this is another really good point with like just having all these like different heroes and like archetypes too, is that Hearthstone, there's 9 heroes, right? But this game, and I don't think that Dota's heroes, actually, to be honest, they're almost on the same level of development as Hearthstone hero classes, right? Where they just have like one ability. That's what Hearthstone classes do. Sure, they have like certain deck cards that they're allowed to play that other classes aren't. Um, but at least as individuals, the heroes of Artifact have actual cards that they can play, and they have their passive abilities. Some don't, some do. But the big thing is that there is a lot more of them. There is a lot more going on, right? When you come into a game of Hearthstone, you play against one of 9 classes. When you come into a game of Artifact, you play against a couple heroes out of like 44. It's insane, It's really different how many you're playing against.
To spin off this, and with 44 heroes to start, and then a lot of the cards obviously going to be units and creeps and stuff like that, it sort of creates a multi-level, like, unit presence on the map that you don't have in other card games, right? In Hearthstone, you have your hero, which is just going to be the type, and then you have creeps of varying strength. In this game, you have creeps of varying strength, we presume, because we can see that the 2/4s from the basic minions, and then we can see stuff like Ravenhook, who seems to be like a 3/6, most likely, I believe is the stat we saw, and he's a varying level creep. He's like a higher cost, higher reward sort of creep. And then heroes they're not just late game like spells, right? They're not just a 10/10 minion that you spawn for 10 mana at the end of the game. Heroes are not like the end all be all. Heroes start in the game, which means that it's like having a randomized board in Hearthstone. Like it's like walking into a game and having you like immediately have Ysera and Deathwing on either side, right? It's that kind of concept where the highest degree of strength is going to be your heroes, but they don't initially like not ruin, but basically decide the game. And so it gives these hybrid levels of how important and how powerful is what is on the map, especially since, like Isaac talked about way earlier, is that items in this game could have early game, mid game, and late game potential, which means that instead of having just a brand new minion that came out of nowhere late game that's super powerful, you have something that's been here the whole time or has been moving around and respawning that is gaining strength, and the enemy can see you gaining strength and respond to that.
Well, it'd be really fun. So anybody, and I mean, if you haven't played Mario Kart at this point, that would be insane. But the whole entire item concept in Mario Kart was designed so that first place people wouldn't always be in first place, right? You could get these swings where people that are really far back can get ahead. Because the way items work in that game is you're driving your car, you run into an item box, and based on your place in the game, it decides your luck of getting really good items. So like if you're like all the way back in 6th, 7th place, you can get something that just like rockets you to the front or knocks out other players. Whereas if you're in first place, you're just going to get like really crappy items like a banana. I wonder if they will do something like that for this game. Something like, okay, so you've lost like a tower and a half. Your enemy, you haven't even knocked down a tower of theirs yet, and the game goes clearly this player's ahead. We're gonna give them bad luck. We're gonna give you better luck. So when it comes to the shopping phase, you'll get an item that has the potential to make a difference, whereas your enemy is just going to get like an average to lower item most of the time. I think that would be like a really exciting way to make sure the games aren't just like slaughter fests because of some previous bad luck in the game. It's almost like pseudo random chance that they implement into games, right? Where it's like guaranteeing that there's some way for the game to go on or for a certain outcome to happen. Is that something that you guys would like to see, or do you think that's like too much luck?
I think as a
I don't.
concept, that's really good, but it also could be extremely volatile because A, you have better luck when you're behind, and again, it shifts the momentum way too far, or you start having these, um, unless like the pseudo random luck would come into play only when you're extremely behind and the other player's extremely ahead. If it was like continuously based on your relative strength or how the game thinks you're doing, then it could cause continuous like stagnation, right? Where suddenly I get a little bit of lead, then my opponent gets better RNG, and then he's ahead, and then vice versa, and goes back and forth until we're out of cards, and whatever the artifact equivalent of fatigue damage is, if it even exists, starts to come into play. So that type of thing would have to be extremely well balanced. And if anyone can do it, Garfield can, but I still think that's a very dangerous concept to play with, especially when you're trying to make a game that moves forward with future sets of cards.
I definitely hope there is some kind of comeback mechanic, but I don't know if straight up RNG manipulation is the way to do it. You could just do it the way Dota does it, where like if you kill a hero who has more net worth or has more kills than you get more gold. That would be, I feel like, it'd be a really easy and simple way to implement a comeback mechanic.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, like, yeah, I think that's actually a really good way to do it. The only thing that I would say though is like maybe it doesn't work on like slight swings of it. It's like really, really big ones, right? So like if you're just getting absolutely destroyed, then the game throws you bones. Otherwise, it doesn't. Like it would have to be very, very bad, the lead, for this to kick in. It's just like a last saving grace type of thing where the game starts going, okay, well this guy is like very, very far behind. Unless we do something now, start giving them good items, this game is over in the next 1-2 turns. Personally, even though I came up with the idea, I would be kind of pissed if it was just like triggering constantly. Like, oh, this guy is like 10 net damage behind on tower damage or whatever. Let's just throw him a rapier. I would be kind of upset about that.
I just wonder how hero allocation to lanes works because I'm seeing in these screenshots like 4 heroes on one side of one lane, and I wonder if it comes down to random luck or choices and stuff like that, or what combination of the two. Because if you're sitting in a lane with a Lycan, a Zeus, a Luna, and a whatever this Jaguar dude is, I mean, you're not going to get very much XP because you're splitting that 4 ways, but that's a lot of pressure there.
From what I understand, is your initial lanes are completely random, but then from there, when like a hero dies, when they respawn, you get to pick where they go. I guess what I kind of just want to say to wrap up the whole entire is this Hearthstone debate is just I think this isn't just because of the design philosophies behind the game. Like I was kind of saying at the beginning, the design philosophy behind Hearthstone. Not saying this is a bad thing. It was just kind of where the developers for the game wanted the game to go. It's more lighthearted fun, and this is like reflected in how long games go, how it's a little bit more simple, it's a little bit more shallow, but also just like the tone and the art of the game is just it's light, it's fun. The way they advertise the game is light and fun, and that was kind of the idea behind Hearthstone. Whereas Artifact, we've already seen Garfield and Gaben talk about. They want this to be the game that you play for thousands of hours and you're still learning. They want this to be the game where you take really long turns and you're thinking really, really deeply about it. And because of these reasons, I think that this is going to be a game that, yes, borrows elements from Hearthstone, like the basic things you need to run a card game and Yes, every unit has an attack and a health value, but at the same time, it is going to be so much deeper, which for some people is going to be unappealing for people who like Hearthstone because it's a lighter game to play. But for people who really want to get into a deeper card game, like people who really enjoy Magic because of its depth, are going to love this game and love how it's taken some of the digital card game and card game general rules from Hearthstone and from its genre, but has made a completely new like concoction of depth.
So congratulations, guys. This game's gonna suck your soul out just like Dota.
Right,
Can't
right.
wait.
You are going to be obsessed, and you're you're going to alienate your friends, and you're going to find yourself in 5 years alone in your basement playing the game all alone.
Like we did.
Right. You're going to find yourself making a podcast about it.
Oh.
Oh,
Too real, too real.
oh. But yeah, so I think that's the really big difference, at least in my eyes, and what makes me really excited about it, even as somebody who really enjoys playing Hearthstone, like right now, I am ready for a game that's a little bit deeper and will cause me to think a little bit more and just give me something more to chew on. You know, I'm tired of the entree. I'm tired of the light little Hearthstone. I'm ready for the main course.
Alright, and that is going to finish us up for the week. That is everything we had planned on talking about. So thank you again for tuning in, and just like last week, if you guys have any feedback, we would love to hear it. We are just trying to improve the show a little bit by little bit. We know that this week the audio was a little messed up in some areas. It wasn't as good quality as last week. We were trying something a little bit different with recording audio, and we're not sure if we really liked it, so we'll be reverting to how we recorded previously last week. So hopefully they'll fix any issues that there was. But that being said, we would love to hear any other feedback you guys have, and as per usual, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.